Praise the Lord, everyone. I hope that you all are doing well today. Well, before I start this video, I would like to thank Sister Rita for sharing my video, Lord, order his footsteps to find me, with Dr. Rhonda Mays. Dr. Rhonda Mays did a video entitled Prophetic Word, Your Husband Will Find You. And that's where she shared my video on her channel. So if you have not checked out Dr. Rhonda Mays' page, please do so. Okay? All right. Okay. Let's start with the video. This video is a video request from Kia, and she wrote me this comment on another video that I recently did, and she said, "Hey, Miss Theresa, can you do a video on disobedience/sin and how it can cause calamity in the generations to come? David had Uriah killed. He repented, but still had to suffer the consequences. His daughter being raped by her brother, the other brother trying to kill David, his father, etc." So I let her know, sure, I could do that video. Many of you probably already know this particular story about King David. So I'm going to talk about King Saul instead, and how his sin and disobedience affected his bloodline while he was alive and even after his death. I'm going to be sharing two incidents during his reign that will speak to Kia's request. The first incident that I'm going to be talking about happened when Saul was given orders by God through the prophet Samuel to destroy the Amalekites, yet he disobeyed God. And I want to read 1 Samuel chapter 15 to you so that you will understand what happened. So let me go to my scriptures. Okay, we ready? And I'm going to be reading from the New Living Translation. Okay? So, one day, Samuel said to Saul, "It was the Lord who told me to anoint you as king of his people Israel. Now listen to this message from the Lord. This is what the Lord of heaven's armies has declared. I have decided to settle accounts with the nation of Amalek for opposing Israel when they came from Egypt." Verse 3, "Now go and completely destroy the entire Amalekite nation, men, women, children, babies, cattle, sheep, goats, camels, and donkeys." So Saul mobilized his army at Telem. There were 200,000 soldiers from Israel and 10,000 men from Judah. Then Saul and his army went to a town of the Amalekites and lay in wait in the valley. Saul sent his warning to the Gibeonites, "Move away from where the Amalekites live, or you will die with them. For you showed kindness to all the people of Israel when they came up from Egypt." So the Gibeonites packed up and left. Okay? That's what I'm talking about. Verse 7, "Then Saul slaughtered the Amalekites from Havilah all the way to Shur, east of Egypt. He captured Agag, the Amalekite king, but completely destroyed everyone else. Saul and his men spared Agag's life and kept the best of the sheep and goats, the cattle, the fat calves, and the lambs, everything, in fact, that appealed to them. They destroyed only what was worthless or of poor quality." Verse 10, Then the Lord said to Samuel, I am sorry that I ever made Saul king, for he has not been loyal to me and has refused to obey my command. Samuel was so deeply moved when he heard this that he cried out to the Lord all night. Early the next morning, Samuel went to find Saul. Someone told him Saul went to the town of Carmel to set up a monument to himself. Then he went on to Gilgal. When Samuel finally found him, Saul greeted him cheerfully. May the Lord bless you, he said. I have carried out the Lord's commands. Then what is all the bleating of sheep and goats and the lowing of cattle I hear? Samuel demanded. It's true that the army spared the best of the sheep, goats, and cattle, Samuel admitted, but they are going to sacrifice them to the Lord your God. We have destroyed everything else. Then Samuel said to Saul, Stop. Listen to what the Lord told me last night. What did he tell you? Saul asked. And Samuel told him, Although you may think little of yourself, are you not the leader of the tribes of Israel? The Lord has anointed you king of Israel. And the Lord sent you on a mission and told you, Go and completely destroy the sinners, the Amalekites, until they are all dead. Why haven't you obeyed the Lord? Why did you rush for the plunder and do what was evil in the Lord's sight? But I did obey the Lord, Samuel insisted. I carried out the mission he gave me. I brought back King Ahab, but I destroyed everyone else. My God. Then my troops brought in the best of the sheep, goats, cattle, and plunder to sacrifice to the Lord your God in Gilgal. But Samuel replied, What is more pleasing to the Lord? Your burnt offerings and sacrifices, or your obedience to his voice? Listen, obedience is better than sacrifice, and submission is better than offering the fat of rams. Rebellion is as sinful as witchcraft, and stubbornness as bad as worshiping idols. So, because you have rejected the command of the Lord, he has rejected you as king. Verse 24. Then Saul admitted to Samuel, Yes, I have sinned. I have disobeyed your instructions and the Lord's command, for I was afraid of the people and did what they demanded. But now, please forgive my sin and come back with me so that I may worship the Lord. But Samuel replied, I will not go back with you. Since you have rejected the Lord's command, he has rejected you as king of Israel. As Samuel turned to go, Saul tried to hold him back and tore the hem of his robe. And Samuel said to him, the Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today and has given it to someone else, one who is better than you. And he is who the glory of Israel and he who is the glory of Israel will not lie, nor will he change his mind, for he is not human that he should change his mind. Then Saul pleaded again, I know I've sinned, but please at least honor me before the elders of my people and before Israel by coming back with me so that I may worship the Lord your God. All he could think about was himself. So Samuel finally agreed and went back with him, and Saul worshiped the Lord. Then Samuel said, Bring King Agag to me. Agag arrived full of hope, for he thought, Surely the worst is over, and I have been spared. But Samuel said, As your sword has killed the sons of many mothers, Now your mother will be childless. And Samuel cut Agag into pieces before the Lord at Gilgal. Then Samuel went home to Ramah, and Saul returned to his house at Gibeah of Saul. Samuel never went to meet with Saul again, but he mourned constantly for him, and the Lord was sorry he had ever made Saul king of Israel. Now I'm going to share with you the backstory of why God wanted the Amalekites destroyed. In Exodus chapter 17, it tells the story of how after Moses led the children of Israel through the Red Sea, and how they came to a place of rest in a town called Rephidim. I hope I'm pronouncing these words right. I don't know, but I'm doing my best, you guys, so bear with me. While they were resting there, the Amalekites attacked and killed some of the Israelites. Deuteronomy 25, verses 7 through 19, gives an account of what happened, and I want to read it to you. And it reads, "Remember what Amalek did to you along the road when you came from Egypt? How he met you along the road and attacked all the stragglers at your rear when you were tired and weary, and he did not fear God? Therefore, when the Lord your God has given you rest from all your surrounding enemies in the land which the Lord your God gives you as an inheritance to possess, you shall wipe out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. You must not forget." Even in Numbers 24, verse 20, Balaam, and a lot of you may remember Balaam, because Balaam was hired by Balak to curse the people of Israel. But Numbers 24 and 20 says, Balaam looked at Amalek and took up his fifth discourse, oracle, and said, Amalek was the first of the neighboring nations to oppose the Israelites after they left Egypt, but his end shall be destruction. So Balaam was giving a prophetic word, all right? So God took this attack against the Israelites personal. This is why he wanted King Saul to kill them. Let me tell you something. God doesn't like it when wicked people prey on the weak or the innocent. These two scriptures confirm what Moses said in Exodus 17, verses 16. And I'm going to read that to you. The Lord will be at war with Amalek from generation to generation. God allowed Moses to speak these prophetic words because he knew that with each new Amalek king, they were going to continue to fight against the Israelites. So Saul's disobedience to God in that matter, okay, caused him to lose his kingdom, and it opened a door for an evil spirit to torment him. Okay, because if you read the story, remember, after that happened, he started being taught. God took his spirit up off of you. Go read it. He took his spirit up off of Saul and then released the tormenting spirit on Saul. Excuse me, guys. It caused him to seek the witch of Endor. His disobedience caused him to chase David for years like a chicken with his head cut off. He was determined he was going to kill David, hoping that if he killed him, the word that Samuel spoke wouldn't come to pass. It caused him to lose his son Jonathan in battle, remember? And it ended by Saul taken his own life. The second incident occurred after the death of King Saul. During the reign of King David, there was a famine in the land that deeply concerned David. So, I'm going to read to you 2 Samuel 21, verses 1 through 9, to show you what happened concerning this incident. Well, let me go there. Okay, and I'm going to read it to you. This is the New Living Translation. There was a famine during David's reign that lasted for 3 years. So David asked the Lord about it. And the Lord said, the famine has come because Saul and his family are guilty of murdering the Gibeonites. So the king summoned the Gibeonites. They were not a part of Israel, but were all that was left of the nation of the Amalekites. The people of Israel had sworn not to kill them. But Saul, in his zeal for Israel and Judah, had tried to wipe them out. David asked the Gibeonites, "What can I do for you? How can I make amends so that you will bless the Lord's people again?" "Well, money can't settle this matter between us and the family of Saul," the Gibeonites replied. "Neither can we demand the life of anyone in Israel." "What can I do then?" David asked. "Just tell me and I will do it for you." Then they replied, "It was Saul who planned to destroy us, to keep us from having any place at all in the territory of Israel. So let 7 of Saul's sons be handed over to us, and we will execute them before the Lord at Gibeon, on the mountain of the Lord." "All right," the king said, "I will do it." The king spared Jonathan's son Mephibosheth, who was Saul's grandson, because of the oath David and Jonathan had sworn before the Lord. But he gave them Saul's 2 sons, Armani and Mephibosheth. So there was another Mephibosheth in that bloodline, whose mother was Rizpah, daughter of Aiah. He also gave them the 5 sons of Saul's daughter Merab, the wife of Adriel, son of Barzillai from Meholah. The men of Gibeon executed them on the mountain before the Lord. So all 7 of them died together at the beginning of the barley harvest. Okay? Again, Saul's behavior was off the chain, y'all. He wouldn't obey God and kill King Amalek like he was told to do. But in his zeal for Israel, he goes and kills some Gibeonites. I'm going to read the backstory to you in a minute, but I just want to share this one point that stuck out to me about the Gibeonites, is that they didn't lump the people of Israel all together. Their beef was only with the house of Saul and not the house of David. This lets me know that they weren't there for revenge, that they was there for justice. Now I'm going to read Joshua chapter 9 so that you can get the backstory of why this famine had came upon the land. And again, I am reading the NLT version, all right? And again, bear with me, you guys, with these names. Now, all the kings west of the Jordan River heard about what had happened. These were the kings of the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, who lived in the hill country, in the western foothills, and along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, as far north as the Lebanon mountains. These kings combined their armies to fight as one against Joshua and the Israelites. But when the people of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho. Okay, remember the walls of Jericho came down, and Ai. They resorted to deception to save themselves. They sent ambassadors to Joshua, loading their donkeys with weathered saddlebags and old patched wineskins. They put on worn out patched sandals and ragged clothes, and the bread they took with them was dry and moldy. When they arrived at the camp of Israel at Gilgal, they told Joshua and the men of Israel, "We have come from a distant land to ask you to make a peace treaty with us." I want y'all to pay attention, guys. The Israelites replied to these Hivites, "How do we know you don't live nearby? For if you do, we cannot make a treaty with you." They replied, "We are your servants." "But who are you?" Joshua demanded. "Where do you come from?" See, these are the questions we need to be asking, okay? When people just pop up in our lives. Let me stay on topic. I just thought about my mother, and when I would be dating somebody, she was like, "Where did you get him from? Who is he?" Okay, verse 9. They answered, "Your servants have come from a very distant country." Now, this was their answer. "We have heard of the might of the Lord your God and of all he did in Egypt. We have also heard what he did to the two Amorite kings east of the Jordan River, King Sihon of Heshbon and King Og of Bashan, who lived in Ashtaroth. So our elders and all our people instructed us, take supplies for a long journey. Go meet with the people of Israel and tell them, we are your servants. Please make a treaty with us. This bread was hot from the ovens when we left our homes, but now, as you can see, it is dry and moldy. These wineskins were new when we filled them, but now they are old and split open, and our clothing and sandals are worn out from our very long journey." So the Israelites examined their food, but they did not consult the Lord. See, this is a whole nother video right here. So the Israelites examined their food, but they did not consult the Lord. Ladies, consult the Lord on everything, especially people. Then Joshua made a peace treaty with them and guaranteed their safety. And the leaders of the community ratified their agreement with a binding oath. This is the key scripture. Verse 16. 3 days after making the treaty, they learned that these people actually lived nearby. The Israelites set out at once to investigate and reached their towns in 3 days. The names of these towns were Gibeon, Kipharah, Beroth, and Kiriath Jearim. But the Israelites did not attack the towns, for the Israelite leaders had made a vow to them in the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. The people of Israel grumbled against their leaders because of the treaty. But the leaders replied, "Since we have sworn an oath in the presence of the Lord, the God of Israel, we cannot touch them. This is what we must do. We must let them live, for divine anger will come upon us if we broke our oath." This is why we can't be making promises lightly, making oaths with people lightly. Can't be making vows with no man lightly. Okay, I'm going to stay on topic, but I could go somewhere else. Verse 21, let them live. So they made them woodcutters and water carriers for the entire community as the Israelite leaders directed. Verse 22, Joshua called together the Gibeonites and said, "Why did you lie to us? Why did you say that you live in a distant land when you live right here among us? May you be cursed. From now on, you will always be servants who cut wood and carry water for the house of my God." That's deep. 24, they replied, "We did it because we, your servants, were clearly told that the Lord your God commanded his servant Moses to give you this entire land and to destroy all the people living in it. So we feared greatly for our lives because of you. That is why we have done this. Now we are at your mercy. Do to us whatever you think is right." So Joshua did not allow the people of Israel to kill them. But that day, he made the Gibeonites the woodcutters and water carriers for the community of Israel and for the altar of the Lord, wherever the Lord would choose to build it. And that is what they do to this day. Okay, so that's the backstory. So King Saul killed some Gibeonites trying to right a wrong during Joshua's reign. But he wouldn't obey God when God told him to kill the Amalekites. As you can see, even after his death, his sins wreaked havoc on his bloodline. His daughter Michal lived out her years bitter and childless until death. Remember, if you read the story about David and he went and got Michal back, and she just had this disdain for him, and she mocked him for dancing naked before the Lord. Okay, this sin, what Saul did, caused a 3-year famine in Israel. The death of 2 sons and 5 grandsons were required to end this famine. Not to mention the emotional trauma that affected Merab, his daughter, and Rizpah, his concubine, because of these deaths. And even as I was reading this, I thought about during that time, most women didn't work. They depended on their husbands and sons. So Rizpah probably lived out her days in poverty since Saul, okay, and now her sons were dead. So you see that it pays to obey God. Some of you might be saying, that's how God handles situations in the Old Testament. But under the New Covenant, we're under grace and no longer pay for the sins of our fathers. You are correct about that. Under grace, we're not punished or executed for our father's sins, but we still can be affected by them. And the example I want to give you is like think about when a man abandons his wife and kids for another woman. They will not have to pay for him breaking his marriage covenant and for adultery. God will judge him alone for those sins. But his actions will impact their lives in unthinkable ways for years to come. Think about it, ladies. Every generation this has happened to suffered some effect from an absentee father. We see these effects daily in our communities, and we have even experienced them in our own lives. It isn't until a man from one generation decides to stand up and say, "I'm not going to leave my wife and kids like my dad did. I am going to stay." And then he puts it into action so that the effects of those sins can be broken. And so his children won't have to suffer the effects of those sins. So being under grace doesn't stop us from being affected by the sins of others. So I hope that this message was what you needed to hear, Kia. And I also pray that it minister to those who need to hear it. And so, with that being said, I love you all with the love of the Lord. And until next time, obey God and stay safe. Bye.